Hello everyone, you're welcome to this program, Africa Must Reason. This is the first episode of this program. My name is the Faceless Presenter. The first episode is on the topic pocket economy. That's to look at how we manage our finances, and thus spend money from our very own pockets. Every week, we shall bring to you an episode. In this program, we shall reason on Africa and look at some key practices of Africans that lead to the poverty nature of the continent and the retrogression of the economy. Wherever you are watching this program from, I know that some people will not like what I am saying, others will be angry. Some will not be happy and even insult me. Others will agree with me and some may support my argument. But however way you may take it, we shall say it exactly as it is. Africa must reason. Let's reason together so that we can grow. Pocket economy, we'll talk about some practices of Africans that I think, if you sit down and carefully think about and consider them, you will understand that they are useless and only lead us into poverty. Most at times when the usual questions like, why are Africans suffering? Why are we this poor? Why are the Europeans and Americans better than us? Are asked, we tend to answer them by pointing our fingers at politicians that they are corrupt, they are selfish, and do not have our interest at heart, but rather think of their own interest. We call them thieves and all sorts of names. It may be true, and we shall surely talk about politicians in subsequent episodes. But before then, let's look at how we manage our own pockets. Our very own little, how do we use it? Let's consider this before pointing our fingers at them. Probably we are not doing things right, and the poverty starts from the mismanagement of our own pockets. Africa must reason. It's about time we began to reason. Indeed, we can blame politicians for our economic woes, but let's consider how we manage the little that we have. What I'm saying may please you, and you may commend me. It may irritate you, and you may insult me, but I am the faceless presenter, so I don't care. I am telling you the literal truth. In this episode, we are going to talk about culture and traditions. There are certain practices that we refer to as culture and traditions that are detrimental to our progress. We may have not thought about them, or probably we have, but seem to neglect their negative consequences on our finances. Let me mention that I'm talking about Africa, but am using Ghana as the case study, so everything I'm saying is based on how I know it to be done in Ghana. It may not be the case in your country. In that case, don't be angry about it. But if it's a similar case in your country, then Africa must reason. Pocket Economy Part 1 wants to establish that if we manage our households and the little money we make well, we may reduce the hardship and may not point fingers at politicians. This is because the little we have has been well managed. But if you mismanage the little that you have, then you will forever blame and point fingers at politicians. Like I've said, this episode talks about culture and traditions. Most at times we talk about culture and traditions, but in my opinion, Africans, Ghanaians as case study, do not understand and know culture very well. In my own understanding, culture and traditions must suit the time and generations we find ourselves in. Culture is the way of doing things of a group of people. Knowing that the world is dynamic and evolved, I think our way of life must be dynamic to suit the time and generation. The people of Ghana, as being used as case study for other African countries, do not see it this way. They believe tradition must go on even if it doesn't suit the generation. In this episode, I am using funerals as an example of the mismanagement of the pocket in Part 1 of Pocket Economy. Africans complain of money and always see lack of money to be the primary problem. But when someone dies, they spend all the little that they have on funerals. Let's start from this question on funerals. I've been asking this question, using Ghana as a case study. Why do we keep the corpse at the morgue for days, weeks, months, and even years after death, but the final burial? This practice incurs cost. My question is, after the period spent at the mortuary, how useful does the corpse become to us? Do we roast it, spice it with pepper and onion, and enjoy it? It's sad that somebody is complaining of poverty because the little to meet some basic needs like food and shelter is not there, but when there's funeral, they spend all they have to pay for the expenses incurred at the mortuary for months. Most at times, when you ask the simple question about why we hold funeral celebrations, the intangible response they give is that it's our culture. So I want to ask, is culture more important than how we can manage our pockets? What prevents us from keeping corpses at the morgue for only 2 days, after which we bury them, to avoid too much of spending? I'm asking you this. Is there any challenge with burying your father 2 days after his death in order not to incur too cost and debt? I want to ask again, is there any law that binds to culture that if we decide not to do that, it will punish us or send us to prison? If we decide to think, and together we decide that after the death of our loved ones, we shall bury them 2 days after to spend very less. I believe by this we shall be able to manage our pockets well and may reduce our financial hardship, pointing no fingers at anyone. I have said this, and I emphasize. The answer to the question about why we hold funeral celebrations is useless and senseless. Because it is a culture that is not suitable for our generation, it was indeed suitable for our forefathers, but not for us. If you ask the question why the final funeral rite is not celebrated few days afterwards, but rather long after, the simple answer that there's no money to hold it at the instance, hence the reason to keep the corpse until there's enough money. This implies that without the final funeral celebrations, we can bury them in 2 days and avoid huge expenses. I have said the truth. You can insult me, but sit down and reason over my point. The little amount that you have in your pocket that could be used to provide for food, pay rent or mortgage, pay for the education of our children, but rather channeled into funeral expenses, sit down, think about it, and ask yourself if it really makes sense. At times, the funniest aspect of it is that when you ask why they can't stop doing it, the senseless response is that if you don't do it, people will talk about it. OMG, Africa must reason. This is part 1. There will be part 2 on funerals. I know you may have responses and comments on this. You can send them to the WhatsApp number on the screen. Now let me make these points explicit. It's not compulsory for us to hold funeral celebrations when our loved ones are dead. Neither is it an obligation for us to keep the corpse of our loved ones at the mortuary for days, weeks, months, and years. Finally, it's not compulsory for us to do all these and spend so much out of our little all because people will talk about it. Rather, let's consider its impact and consequences on our pocket economy. In the Western world, precisely in Europe and other places, wealthy men are buried 2 or 3 days after their death. This is all because the party and feast we refer to as funeral is bogus and not practiced by the white. They only take the corpse to the church for burial service, after which they accompany them to the cemetery for burial and last respect, and everyone goes home. They don't spend anything apart from the little cost involved in procuring the casket and for few days mortuary charges. This is because the white reasons and think the money to be used for such celebrations could be used to make life better, most especially investing it to make more money. My worry again is 1 week celebration which is characterized by drinking, dancing, making of noise, and time wasting. Your pocket economy, look at how you are mismanaging your own pocket, and you have the guts to point fingers at politicians. Meanwhile, what you can do or not do to keep money in your pocket, you can handle, and you are blaming politicians. Then, if the entire country is entrusted to you, it won't take you hours to ruin it. Shame on you. My point is that funeral celebrations in Africa are useless. When our loved ones are dead, let's take them to church for burial service if we are Christians or do as our religion demands, after which we take them to the cemetery for burial and nothing else. Let's do this to avoid huge expenses and stop wailing because of burden of huge expenses and lack of money to organize funerals. Someone may talk about the donations we receive from others as a tangible reason. We shall talk about that in the next episode. But before then, as we begin this program, Africa must reason. And in this first episode, Pocket Economy, the point I'm making is that let's stop this practice of holding funeral celebrations when someone is dead, all in the name of culture and traditions. And because of that, we keep the body at the mortuary for months and years because we want to raise enough money for the funeral. Or we are waiting for someone to travel down from outside, hence spending huge amounts of money. All these deny us the opportunity to raise enough money to invest in industrial activities, thereby causing the poverty nature of our continent. It is senseless. I will not insult. I'm saying it as it should be. You may choose to insult me. I repeat, final funeral rites are useless and have no significance. The only reason why we do it is because it's our culture and traditions. Culture and traditions must be suitable for the generation. So let's consider our generation and suit it with the culture it deserves. The white do same and are living better. We can imitate them. The saddest aspect of it all is that most times our loved ones die because of lack of enough money to cater for their medical needs, but after their death, we get enough money to buy new clothes and fabrics. In the next episode, we shall discuss that in details. Pocket economy means we should manage the little we have in our pockets well, and stop spending them on funerals. Every day you have a funeral to attend, most especially on Saturdays. At times going to 5 different ones on one Saturday, spending on transport costs and donations. Why won't you suffer? African, you will suffer. Black person, you will suffer. Kodark, you will suffer. Africa must reason. Let's begin to reason, Africans. This is episode 1 on the Pocket Economy Part 1. Next week, we shall bring to you Part 2 of Pocket Economy. Let's stop some of these useless cultural practices, and we shall live a better life. You can send your comments to the WhatsApp number on the screen. Till we meet again next week, it's bye for now. Africa must reason. Subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and